So, we are launching a revamped version of our analytics tool in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah.
Which we're going to be leading off with a physical newspaper send before we launch the actual analytics platform.
It's looking quite exciting. I've had a sneak peek already over
When did you see it?
I've been I wanted to kind of wait until it was launched so everybody else could see it, but I think I just wanted to see a sneak peek.
What did you reckon?
It's quite exciting. There's a lot there, a lot from different partners, a lot our thoughts, our opinions, but then also leading on to kind of the podcast today, which is the kind of key trend. So
yeah, so that'll be going out on, I think it goes to print on the 16th, so we'll be sending that out on the 27th to clients, partners, and sign-ups, as well as some prospects as well. So people can look out for that. I think it'll be landing on desks like the 1st to the 3rd, I think.
Yeah.
People will be starting to get it. So we thought we'd start pushing that with a bit of a video series on trends, some of the insight we're going to pull from the platform, and we'll probably talk about some stuff that is going to be in the paper as well, and that physical send when people get it. So we'll probably do these, I think, once a month. I think we're going to do this. And then when are you off on maternity? That's
going to be end of March, so I might even get a start of March one in if possible.
Right, that'll be cool. I guess it'll give you some insight into a new industry as well.
I'll have to follow trends throughout the year and listen to these to actually keep up to date with what's happening. So
cool. Right then, so what we'll be doing normally is we'll be digging into some insight from the actual platform itself. But at the minute, as it's not fully live, we're going to go with some bits that we've pulled from a report that we did last year.
Yeah.
So I think we'll start by looking at half of that report, which was the 6 e-commerce trends that shaped 2022. And I think the first one we'll look at is shifting consumer behaviour. So where we focused here was on the cost of living crisis, rise of energy costs, that type of thing. People being more conservative with the spending, trying to keep things to a tight budget. Its effects on sort of luxury e-com and people who are selling products which aren't sort of everyday essentials, I guess.
Yeah.
What we found, so basically I would give a bit of a forward to what we're actually pulling on that stats platform. Basically, our stats platform picks up everything across our Salesfire network. So every data point on there is being tracked, and when then collating that and putting it into this dash. Some people might have already been on Trend Desk before, to be fair. It's great for average order values. It's great for overall revenue and getting a good idea of sort of...
It's going to be great for this first, topic in terms of the consumer behaviour, because I think it's going to be so important from last year. With this being a trend, it's not going to really change, is it? Especially for the first 6 months we're going into for this year. So I think when you're saying there about the trends platform and the different industries, whether that's home, luxury, it's going to be integral, really.
Yeah, so what we found the last year, into end of 2022, 79% of e-commerce businesses with superior supply chains, basically the 79% of e-com businesses with good supply chains, basically we've nailed it from beginning to end, have seen the biggest growth when it comes to revenue.
Yeah.
I think we've seen 80% of companies see really big growth when they've got all of the ducks in a row when it comes to sort of supply and making sure they've got enough product and inventory on site.
Yeah.
And I think that starts to show how retailers are coming up alongside Amazon. Because I think the Amazon biggest selling point and the Amazon offering is the fact that people can get that product whenever they want it straight to them.
I think there's been a trial in a lot of models and a lot of strategies in the last year, Amazon, haven't they, regarding the Prime Buy and picking up the collection from certain stores as well.
Yeah.
I know they've took a hit in terms of decreasing kind of their warehousing. They were popping up everywhere in the last 2 years, but I think the last year, especially with the last year, February, the increase of subscriber costs as well.
Right, okay.
Be interesting in terms of the churn for that, how much Prime and how much people are actually looking to go more back to retailers.
What was the increase in subscriber cost? Do we know?
I don't know if it was something, it was an increase like 9 or 10%.
Oh, is it that big a jump?
Yeah, so I think it was February last year. So I know a lot of people, especially with the cost of living crisis, as well as shopping online, will be reviewing their subscriptions as well.
It's bad that, 'cause I've had a Prime subscription for years and I didn't even realise they'd bumped that.
Yeah, it was kind of one of the odd emails that they sent out.
Right, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's going to be quite interesting just to see in terms of, I know they've done a lot of models on the back of that to try and get consumers to pick up from certain stores or the Prime buy, and how they can work more with retailers. But I think with the shift in kind of consumer behaviour, retailers now, it's more it's more important than ever than the retention. So I know in terms of acquisition, which we can kind of talk about later, but it's retaining those consumers that you've had previously, whether it's Black Friday, they've joined. It's going to be more, right, how do you actually get them to stick on your site rather than competitors?
That's an interesting one, because I mean, how does that work in terms of retention? Tactics like just sending an email out with an increase in subscriber cost. I know we're going off retail a little bit there, but I mean, that's not really empathetic to a consumer, is it, at that point?
No, and when you say empathy there as well, I think when you're mentioned about the supply and demand and the warehousing as well, we had this, during the pandemic, the empathy webinar were launched, probably was it 18 months ago?
It's quite a while ago now, yeah.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the warehousing and empathy and how you communicate to, your customers about the supply and demand. So I feel like we've had 18 months of that crisis. We've kind of went from COVID to kind of this skimflation, that I'll call it, is, people, it's a reactivation strategy and a reaction strategy to the next 6 months are not going to change. And it's those little moments, as you say there about the retention. I know there's a lot of retailers now looking at ways in terms of loyalty to try to retain customers, even with the number of returns that we're seeing last year that increased. Are actually rewarding customers for like viewing their sizing guides and shoe size guides.
Oh wow, okay. What is it within like loyalty points and things like that?
Loyalty points, yeah. So actually helping them decrease their returns by actually using their content on site.
It's interesting because that stuff can be automated to quite a big degree as well.
Yeah.
But I think the difference between doing it well and doing it poorly is making sure that the sentiment is right at the beginning, and you're only really automating the outreach, I guess.
Yeah.
So as long as you've got the messaging right at the top, people aren't as annoyed by an obviously automated email or an obviously automated set of comms, if that makes sense.
You need someone at the end of that road if there needs to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't see I dare say we've seen it, well, with our sort of automated email products and the stuff we've got coming up, we've seen our users reacting pretty well to, as long as the message is right at the beginning, it doesn't necessarily put people off as much if the email, for instance, is very obviously automated.
No, and I think in terms of automation, in terms of that like basket abandonment rate as well, I think it was saying monthly a customer can abandon £30 worth of products in their basket. And if you think of how many customers they are in terms of the UK and how many billions of pounds are being lost in retail because of that. So when you're mentioning about the automation, it's the abandonment, but also how that fits in with all the other marketing channels as well. Yeah,
and making sure it's acknowledging those other touch points, I guess.
Yeah, it's not just kind of a tick box and that's how it goes. It's how does it, relate to kind of the content, that human element side of it, especially with the consumer change. A lot of people with this skimflation are now looking at, they are spending more time on site. They want to know in terms of their competitor, am I actually going to be worthwhile buying this? Is it a long-term purchase? Or in terms of Black Friday with discounts, that's kind of two questions. Is it going to have a lifetime value for me, or is it a Christmas gift that I can kind of just weigh up and compare with competitors to see if someone actually is going to have more value in that?
It's interesting that because there's another stat in this section. More than 25% of shoppers are abandoning carts if same-day shipping isn't available.
Yeah.
And the annoying thing about this is we see so many times same-day shipping and little features like this these ISPs, I guess, being available, just not messaged out properly at all, and being hidden under, I don't know, hidden in a product page, category page, not being wrote up properly on a basket.
No, you normally find them on the product page, right underneath.
There's certain places you look, isn't there? There's certain places that you go to look for these things as well.
Which is fine. Count down, maybe 10 minutes until, next day shipping's unavailable. But it is, how do you apply that message across the whole journey? Because they might not even get the product page.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is the place where you don't mind so much being targeted by automated comms, because you're triggering something that you're actually looking for at that point, I guess.
Yeah, you're not wasting their time.
Yeah. And that's the key thing as well, I think, because all of these, all these tactics are available to everyone.
Yeah.
You pay a subscription to certain services, you got like our own. It's absolutely fine. We'll automate enough for you. But if that message isn't right at the beginning, and the business model isn't empathetic enough when it comes to that sort of thing, which nowadays as well, that's not just for sentimental reasons only. It's actually a money maker. It's actually a good, strong business tactic as well in terms of revenue.
When you mentioned in terms of that key stat for next day shipping, in general, yes, that would have been interesting, but it's even more interesting in the last quarter with postal strikes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
so it's
that's
about
a good shout.
Reviewing your key messaging. Yes, at Christmas time, you have a cut-off day for deliveries, but I guess a lot of retailers are maybe reviewing that kind of shipping strategy and how they're communicating to their consumers on site for expectations, because I guess if they're not, they're going to get a lot of communication back or a lot of feedback and reviews based on delivery times.
I guess that also plays into this right message, right time, when automation works, when automation doesn't.
Yeah.
If you've built one of your ISPs on next day delivery, speed of delivery, and you're facing something like a postal strike, how are you going to get on top of that and make sure all your automations, all of your workflows, all your email workflows are in place? It's a lot of work to consider, especially the times we're going through at the minute, when you can be sure that there's going to be more strikes and it's going to happen, especially touching back on cost of living and the way wages are going at the minute. It's going to happen again.
Yeah.
And having all those workflows and all those things in place, if you haven't got someone who knows what's where, how they're using it, and what the core philosophy is, I guess, why you're doing it, you're going to be lost. If you just follow in the pack with, we need to do this because they're doing it, we need to do this because they're doing it, and you don't fully understand what people need and what people are wanting out of it, you're going to find yourself pretty stuck, I think.
Yeah. I think a lot of people were probably shouting, thinking, if I have that message on next day shipping, and, crossing their fingers and hoping for the best, going, well, at least our messaging's maybe stronger than our competitor. It's going to bite them later on down the line for that retention.
Yeah, and I guess that is also where people need to be aware of what's happening on social, what's happening with trends and things like that, and not just parroting what they've seen elsewhere, fully understanding what the trend is and what is actually ethically happening, what's socially happening with it. It's a bit like we touched on the Mother's Day and anniversary type automated emails that have been going out, with people getting ahead of it and saying, look, if you don't want to subscribe to this because of certain personal reasons, please let us know. Yeah. But if you weren't fully aware of the reason people were doing it, and you were just doing it because they're doing it, so I'm going to copy, you find yourself in hot water quite quickly, I think. Yeah,
you do. It's a lot of with the certain awareness days, and I think campaigns, it's like, is it actually relevant to your brand?
Yeah.
Or is it just you're looking at key dates in a calendar and ticking them off as you go along?
Yeah, and I think in a roundabout way, I'm saying if you don't actually care, there's no point pretending, because you will get caught out with it eventually. Yeah. So I guess it's also making sure you have the right people in the business who can understand those things and are up on that. If personally you're not, you need to get those people around you and make sure that they're informing you and feeding things like that back to you. It's a bit like I know we put in the notes here about Pinterest and their trends predictions.
That's been interesting.
So what percent? Do you want to just run us through that quickly?
Yeah, so I think the Pinterest trends they've been on point the last, I think it's 2 to 3 years, with kind of their vision. They look at kind of what people are searching for within the year, whether it's keywords and certain trends. Mm-hmm. And over the last 3 years, they produce an annual report.
Yeah.
And from this, they'll kind of do their own trends and predictions of what people think is going to be popular whether that's on their boards or even just search terms in general. So I know they've released their annual report this year and what's coming up. So it's just quite interesting that, as well as, you know, looking at your data, it's looking at other tools, whether that's Pinterest trends, Salesfire trends as well. I think it's using a lot of touch points. And again, not just the guesswork kind of finger in the air.
And I think it's 80% it is we've got here. They're 80% correct in their prediction of what's going to be trending across the board, but also that takes into account a lot of e-commerce as well.
Yeah.
The other good thing about that is if you're involved in it from the beginning, with the new year coming up, with these sort of it's not even an analytics platform, but using the analytics on that platform, not only are you going to have a good handle on what's going to be big, you can understand where it's coming from and what it's doing and how you can then message it out properly and use that to your full advantage.
I think in terms of Pinterest as well, a lot of people are going to be more cautious of how they spend and what they spend on. So if it is a key project, whether it's a room or an event, they are going to be using a tool like that for inspiration and a board, and then using that to then use those search terms for shopping online. So I think it's going to be quite interesting. Some of the search terms I know I definitely won't be searching for this year. Was it sci-fi, mushrooms, things like that? But it's more, they've been right for the last 2 to 3 years, and I think it's looking at those reports, looking at the data within your own industry, not just kind of picking a key stat out of maybe an industry you're not even interested in or is not even in your remit, but is using all that, you know, the tools and the power to determine your strategy for the year.
I think you can you buy directly through Pinterest? Yeah. With a pin? I think you can, can't you?
Yeah. So it's a lot of home and DIY with the room inspirations as well. You know, a lot of people might not want to, you know, ideally you'd go into a store to see, you know, paint colours as well.
Yeah.
A lot of inspiration, you'll be like, I like that if you don't know the colour of it. But now people are tagging and relating and, you know, kind of building up this, you know, catalogue of how this has come together. So then you can pick and choose of what you like. So I think it's worked well in the home and DIY sector.
It's one of those channels that I think people don't think to leverage. I mean, outside of fashion, maybe. Fashion, home and DIY, they're quite obvious ones.
Party and events as well.
Yeah.
Probably building up more, yeah.
But I bet it's worth a dig for other retailers to jump in there. And even if those trending topics aren't direct, they're potentially umbrella terms for other things and other touch points that they can get involved with that do relate more directly to them, I guess.
Yeah.
But again, it's making sure you're there at the beginning so you can make sure your content's right. You can make sure you know what you're talking about. People are more savvy than ever when it comes to ethics and sort of moral leanings with purchases as well nowadays.
Yeah.
So they're going to tell in a second if you don't really know what you're talking about and you're just jumping on board or something.
There's no time to be behind.
No.
Or even you need to be one step ahead, especially for this year. It's going to be very interesting, I think, especially down, as well as we're mentioning about the search and the terms, is using that data, but then also, I guess, personalisation. Kind of personalisation for me, it's a given. It's not really, it's a trend that comes up year on year, and personalisation people see in different ways. But kind of what's your take in terms of, you know, identifying trends and, you know, using that for personalisation?
Well, mine personally.
Yeah.
So my take, again, it goes back to sort of using empathy as sort of a buzzword, but a strong understanding of what it is you're trying to say. Because I think too often we say take marketing channels for an example. Oh, we don't use Pinterest. Pinterest for fashion. Pinterest is for homeware. We don't use this because of this. We don't use it because of this. Do you really understand why you're not using it? Or are you just doing it because you've seen other people in your industry do it?
Yeah.
Same with this chat GPT.
Yes.
And the AI sort of content generation in general, whether it's for art, whether we're seeing it for copy and things like that now. Amazing tool, but it's not learning or providing any new insight. Obviously, it's learning all the time, but all it's doing is pulling together bits of what's already there and firing it back at you.
It's a bit of an experiment tool, isn't it, for a lot of retailers, you know, even B2B as well. I think it launched, was it the end of November last year? What I did find interesting is when you look at, say, TikTok, Instagram, I think Instagram took, it was roughly 30 days to gain 1 million users. there's a lot of experimentation to do. People are interested on what might work for them.
Yeah.
I think it took them 5 days to get 1 million users. I think it's up to 2 million now.
Wow.
And I know there's a lot of retailers that are shouting about it, especially in our LinkedIn, about how it's supporting, you know, not supporting, but I guess they're testing it with even email subject lines and SEO, kind of close your ears, Josh, with the marketing side. It's not going to get rid of any marketing, you know, teams anytime soon. But again, it's interesting.
I can see you getting rid of the legwork, like product descriptions, for example. Potentially a great time saver for
Maybe
e-com
FAQs
managers.
as well.
FAQs, things like that aren't going to change. But when it comes to sort of my point there being any empathetic writing, fully understanding a situation, if you've got someone who isn't on the ball and they're using that for even the smallest bits of copy, and there's something in there where the sentiment's just not right or the concept's just slightly misunderstood, which it's going to do because all it's doing. It's an unbelievably impressive tool, but my worry is sort of ethically, what are we really doing, taking from a lot of other people's work?
I think they'll get caught out easily.
And I think you'll get caught out easily as well.
Yeah.
Just from a more cutthroat business side of things, will save a lot of time. But if you're not on top of that, you're going to get caught out.
I'd love to see a website built from scratch with all the content generated from that.
And the other thing is, I think it just represents how low our bar might have got with content if we're looking at that and going,
lazy.
wow.
Do you not think it's
a bit
lazy?
It's a bit like, wow, that's exactly how we would have wrote it. And I think at that point we need to be going, well, is that how far we really got to?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying, obviously I'm probably guilty of it as well, but that sort of bit of malaise with how we're actually writing and what we're doing. Yeah. My other worry is that it's going to see the rise of those extra kooky content creators who are like, they can never copy this because we're so wild. It's a bit like, nah. Yeah,
I think it's even when you go into the, you know, we've mentioned about that content on site, but also paid ads as well. I think that's a bit of a risky one as well.
What, in terms of content created for them?
Yeah.
How do you mean?
I just think it's great to use maybe as a starting point or to give you some ideas.
Oh, right. Okay. I get you.
And I know there's loads of different ways in terms of, you know, how you review your competitors' ads as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think with kind of, you know, this OpenAI tool and what they're developing is, experiment with it. But again, take bits and pieces to build your own and make the most out of it. Don't rely on one tool or one thing. Is again looking at the trends that's happening and going, right, what little piece of information can I use to build that on? Then use your own data to make those decisions as well.
I guess it's never, if it's not bringing insight to the table, and it is, and you are finding that it's going to be able to replace what you're doing, without any change in quality, it probably means that you haven't got the concepts down and you aren't fully understanding what you're talking about from the beginning again.
Yeah.
So you are finding that it could replace sort of functions that you've got at the minute. Maybe you just need to take a look at those functions and make sure if they're firing properly.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to bring back a report. It's not going to bring back new insight. It's not going to bring back new analysis. It's not going to be able to create something that's going to be actionable for someone to take forward and then create something new with.
Customers are more savvy as well these days. Obviously, we work in e-commerce and a SaaS business. During Christmas and New Year, I needed to reach out, and using a chatbot, I know straight away is to speak to supervisor or speak to anyone. Yeah. And I can jump that queue because I know straight away I'm not going to get the answer I get. So it's more kind of how you use it wisely, and the FAQs we've mentioned, the certain kind of our search solution as well is having those kind of key quick links. Yeah. At your fingertips rather than having to kind of crawl through the site to find them, is creating that content that's, you know, that's the most common about returns. It might be the frequently asked questions, it might be kind of delivery updates. Yeah, that's great. You might not want to know them in terms of about the updates. They might be updating every day, every week based on these postal strikes, but your customers need to know. So you need to be reviewing where's the best place for this content on the website to make sure that I can get them to move on, you know, to different category and product pages down the line. I think it's all about that personalisation, really, for me. And again, it's a given. You know, we say it's a trend last year, the year before, and especially this year, moving on to kind of the data side. you mentioned about kind of me moving on to maternity leave. I've been shopping in a whole new industry I never thought I'd be even searching for or even purchasing from. That's been really interesting with the personalisation, especially email journeys. So not just using purchase behaviour, but then also capturing my email to identify where I am in that timeline.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so especially say for newborn stuff, I might be shopping for newborn stuff pre-Black Friday, and that's what I've been targeted at. And then later on down the line, it's kind of, have you thought of these in 3 to 6 months' time? Or as it's a new industry for me, actually educating me.
I guess as well, it's a time when you're going to be most sensitive to these comms, I guess. So if someone isn't, it doesn't seem genuinely thoughtful or it doesn't seem helpful, and it is stock clearance under the guise of, have you thought about this for your baby? And it's really just get rid of a lot of shit. You're going to be much more tuned into that and much more switched on with it.
Yeah, you do. You spend a lot, well, I've definitely spent a lot more time educating. Do I actually need it? There's a lot of brand names that you never heard of before, and you want the best.
Yeah.
Obviously, and I think word of mouth's been a key one with forums and recommendations from people.
Like the community side of things.
Yeah, so it's your reviews, looking at reviews, you know, might be a great deal on site, but again, has the customer service, or if there's anything been wrong, that's been factored in. You don't want the stress.
Yeah.
If that happened to come back, especially if it's a large item. But I think for the personalisation and email journeys, yes, you've got your basket abandonment, but from that is how you actually support that retention and that lifetime value. So I've purchased something, say, from Tommy TP. They've got a whole new categories, not just for newborn, but actually going up to 6+ years. How can they bring me back to use their products for at least 6 years?
Yeah.
Or even recommend their products. So I think it's, you know, it's that bite-sized content, and that data-driven is using my information. You know, I've opted in for that. Is use it wisely. Don't kind of push anything in my face that I'm not ready for, because I'm going to ignore it.
Think about the long term.
Yeah.